Okay, so hopefully you've set the brutal facts for your location. And then I asked the question, how does this make us feel? And, you know, I always think this should trouble us. There are too many people in our nation who are far from God. Too many people in our towns, our cities, our communities that are far from God. And they're not hearing the gospel. This should trouble us. And when we look at the size of the task as well, we could be easily overwhelmed by this. But what I want us to do, I just want us to think, have we ever seen these facts change anywhere? And what we're going to do is we're going to look together at Acts 19 and verse 8 to 10. Okay, and just read that together. Let me read that. So Paul entered the synagogue. You could read it with your partner, just pause the video, but I'll read it for the sake of the video. Paul entered the synagogue and spoke boldly there for 3 months, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. But some of them became obstinate. They refused to believe and publicly maligned the way. So Paul left them. He took the disciples with him and had discussions daily in the lecture hall of Tyrannus. This went on for 2 years, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. Fantastic passage, fantastic story there of Paul in Ephesus. And the question I want you just to talk about together is what happened there in Ephesus, and then we'll look at it together. Okay, so we're just going to look at what happened there in Ephesus. So, Paul, as was his custom, he arrives in the city, he enters the synagogue, and he begins to proclaim the gospel there, arguing persuasively about the kingdom of God. He does that for a few months, but some of them became obstinate, refused to believe. They, give him some resistance, as is quite typical, really. And so he leaves there and he takes the disciples with him. He'd met 12 men earlier who had become disciples. He'd baptized them. They'd received the baptism of the Spirit. And he heads off down the road to the lecture hall of Tyrannus. This is not a big lecture theatre or anything. It's a small school hall that Paul has free use of, probably most afternoons when it's too hot for the school to be there functioning. And it's not a great big preaching centre. Paul's training disciples there. And it says this went on for 2 years, so that all the Jews and Greeks who lived in the province of Asia heard the word of the Lord. And there we have it. I know that one translation says that every resident, all the Jews and all the Greeks, in the province of Asia, some translations, Asia Minor, province of Asia, they heard the gospel. What does it say? Paul talks about they heard the word of the Lord. And we're real clear, this is not just Paul preaching great sermons at a preaching centre. That's not what this is at all. This is Paul proclaiming the word of the Lord, and the gospel going out from that place, and people hearing the gospel across the whole province. Every resident, every Jew, every Greek. And this took place in a period of 2 years. Wow. That's amazing. Just amazing what's going on there. They're out from Ephesus, the word of the Lord, the gospel going across a whole region so that everybody is hearing the gospel within a relatively short period of time. And across the province of Asia there, we're probably talking about a population of about 2 to 3 million people in that province there. So here we see something amazing going on. Here we see the brutal facts of a region being changed. Here we see numbers of new disciples, huge numbers of new disciples being made. And we see new churches being planted and reproducing right across the area there in the province of Asia. Now we would call this no place left. Paul labouring in an area until every resident is hearing the gospel. Disciples are being made, churches are being planted and then reproducing across the area. And we'd cast this as a vision for something we call no place left. No place left where every resident in the region isn't hearing the gospel. And we could, really set a vision for that over a period of time. What about that for a vision for your town or your village or your city? Even maybe just your relational network. How long would it take you or I to reach every person in our relational network? And just ensuring they hear the gospel clearly with an invitation to follow Jesus. Okay. Then we ask a couple of questions. What's it going to take to get to this? What's it going to take to begin to see every resident in a stated place hearing the gospel? Okay, what's it going to take? And then, would you give your life to this? That's a great question. We're finding there are people everywhere that we're training and they see this vision and they begin to say, that's something worth giving your life for. So here's the question, just for you to talk about with your partner there. What's it going to take to get to this? Would you give your life for something like this? Would you labour towards this? Okay? And then my last question is this. What will you do next? When you leave this training today or you switch off this video, perhaps you've watched some of the other videos we've shown before just about how to connect with people, how to share your story, how to share the gospel. What will you go and do next in order to see no place left in your town, city or region? Thanks everyone.